Hello, everyone. My name is Aaron Kuder, and we're going to be drawing some She-Hulk today. So this is a sketch that I've already started. It's a bust of good old She-Hulk, and I'm going to throw some inks on it real quick. We're going to get to another piece, and it's going to be larger and more in charger, and it's going to be fun. Here we go. So I'm going to start with the hair. I'm using a brush pen right now because brush pens are great because they allow you to vary the size of the line that you're making. Let's go to a different brush pen. And that's that aspect of varying line shape is really great for hair in particular. It allows you to really get the organic nature of hair. For those of you who don't know me, like I said, my name is Aaron Kuder. You might have seen my work in the Fantastic Four. Also worked on Ghost Rider. I just wrapped up drawing a couple issues of Thor, 7 and 8. So be sure to pick them up. And lots of fun projects. I don't know. At any point you all have questions, feel free to shoot them out. I've got a friend of mine in the wings that's gonna relay those questions to me and let me know which ones are really just pending. All right. So as you can see here, we've got all this hair. And one of the things you try to pay attention to with hair, especially if it has a darker tone, is lighting. So I don't know if you could see, but along here I have this area that I've kind of highlighted out to be basically where the light is going to be reflecting off the hair. And then all these little lines. All right, so let's see. Apologies if I'm making you dizzy. I'm gonna move around the paper a lot during this because there's a natural flow to the way your hand moves. And sometimes, especially when drawing curves, it's easier to draw them. For me, it's easier to pull a curve rather than push a curve. See, it even shows you there. Yeah. See, what should I talk about? Let's talk about how I got into comics. In general, I was a comic book fan growing up. When I was a kid, my parents used to move around a lot, and comics and my sketchbook were like my best friends growing up. I remember long moves across the country where all I had was a box of comics and a sketchbook, and I would just whittle away the hours on that drive, drawing and making up my own stories. One of the first comics I ever got was this Marvel Team Up collection book. And it kind of introduced me to all of the characters in the Marvel U. Um, and Iron Man teaming up with Captain America, and Spider-Man teaming up with Red Sonja, I think it was. Avengers and the X-Men. It was all like these classic team ups. It was a great book. You should find it. Can't remember the exact title at the moment. But I remember I looked through that thing so much as a kid that the binding fell off eventually. So again, yeah, I'm going through drawing this hair, and I'm kind of starting details first. I don't know how other people do it, but I find that by getting the shape of the details down, yeah, my hand's shaking. That's weird. And kind of filling in the overall silhouette of the character beforehand kind of helps with feeling out how the overall pose and power of the piece, the energy that you project, is going to stand out. It allows you to tweak the final silhouette to match like the more organic nature of drawing. Question. Do you have a favorite writer to work with? Man, it depends on the project. You know, I've really enjoyed working with. I've never worked with a writer that I didn't enjoy working with. It's kind of a loaded question. Let's see. Each writer has their own little quirks to work with. So when working with Dan Slott on Fantastic Four, man, that guy like gets the characters. Like he is just as much of a fan of comics as he is a professional in comics. Like his insight into the characters of the Marvel universe is just so well grounded in his love for the stories that it was really refreshing to work with him, because you know he brought back that childhood glee of comics. Worked with Jerry Dugan on Guardians of the Galaxy. I think I really enjoyed that because we both have these this kind of love for the weird and the things that make other people go gross or neat. So that's always fun. Any tips on drawing faces? Another question. Faces are tough. Faces can be really, really tough. So I think naturally we all have this ability, like as artists, we kind of learn originally how to draw faces by drawing our own face. So the best way to get to learn to draw faces is by drawing faces of people that don't look like you, that from all over the world. Learn there's the basic proportions of getting where the eyes and the nose go, but I think the trick to faces is capturing the personality of the character. Like in particular here, She-Hulk, she's got kind of stronger cheekbones, stronger jaw um, than other characters. Larger eyelashes, I think. I think that's mostly because of Sal Buscema kind of putting his stamp on her, or John Buscema, sorry. Question: who are your comic book aspirations when growing up? Who did you look up to? Let's see. Who did I look up to? I was a huge Art Adams fan. When I bought, I think I got like a New Mutants annual, where it was the New Mutants and the X-Men on Asgard by Art Adams, and it just rocked my world. I was a little bit older by that point, but still huge influence there. I was a big fan of the 90s X-Men stuff. We got a lot of that in my long boxes. I enjoy art, like I've grown to enjoy art of just about every sort of genre. It can be quirky, it can be highly detailed, but if it's well crafted, it's well crafted, and the style no longer sways me one way or the other. I see it more of as the craft and how it's created that appeals to me more and more as I get older. Dead air. So finally kind of feeling warmed up. Kind of falling into the zone. So there's probably gonna be moments where I'm a little quiet. Just feeling the drawing, as it were. Another question: who is my favorite Marvel villain? Dr. Doom, I guess. He's like but I don't know. Is he a villain? That's up to you guys. But he's definitely a nationalist. I really love Kang the Conqueror. Anything of that weird, like, sort of time vortex, what if land of non. Enjoy the heck out of that stuff. Lots of hair. Lots of hair here, folks. Close to done with the hair. Next question. Someone's asked, do I still have any of the comics I had from when I was a kid? Yes, I probably have. I think the last count is around 10,000 comic books in my house. that not counting comics that I've drawn myself or worked on. I don't go through them nearly as much as I would like to, but they all have memories. They all have like kind of a fun nostalgic beat that I like picking up every now and again. Okay, I think I'm done with the hair. How long have I been a Marvel artist? 5 years? Something like that. So what I'm doing now is I moved from that brush pen to a multi-liner pen. This is a rather thicker one. It's 0.03 or 0.3. And this is to really lock in that silhouette. When I say silhouette, I mean the overall shape of something. Silhouettes are important in comics and in storytelling. They allow a reader to be able to identify a character or an object without having to be told what it is. A good character design has a good, unique silhouette, so you can just immediately identify it. What is my favorite Marvel character to draw? I don't really have one. It's whatever one I'm drawing at the moment. I grew up a big Spider-Man fan, so I could probably draw Spider-Man in my sleep. Probably have with some of my deadlines. But a little deadline joke for y'all, in case you don't know. So does drawing hair make me zen? A little bit. I really like organic things like drawing hair and nature. Brings out the Bob Ross in me, I guess. The things that have a organic flow to them, they kind of fall into my happy place. What is my proudest moment working for Marvel so far? Proudest moment working for Marvel so far. So it's not going to be anything that like I can point to and like be like this particular moment or this particular thing. Well, actually, no, that's not true. I think probably it was drawing Ben Grimm's wedding. It's always comics are fun because of the conflict. Nobody they to me, reading a comic book is usually about violence or people not using their words to to address issues. But it is so nice to be able to draw characters getting a little reward for what they go through. And drawing the wedding scene was just super awesome. Really, really wonderful. Other than that, it'd have to be drawing the Guardians of the Galaxy sneaking into, I believe it's the Collector's Fort. They sneak into the Collector's Fort by hiding in a giant pile of animal poo, alien animal poo that the Collector is collecting. That was pretty hilarious. It was hilarious to the second grader in me, or high schooler in me, or 30-year-old me. What tools do you typically use when you're creating characters? So if I'm creating or designing a character, I tend to use the computer more. I tend to use computer programs and draw on my computer because it's a lot easier to be able to make a mistake and just wipe it away. Although, that said, drawing a character and making mistakes, sometimes those mistakes can be, like happy mistakes. And you can occasionally use those to make the design stronger. But all in all, time being a factor, it's just a little bit quicker to design on a computer. I don't find it as enjoyable. I really prefer drawing by hand. But as far as tools go, drawing on a computer is one way to streamline your creative process. It's not necessarily. It doesn't necessarily make the end all the product better, but it does allow you to play around with different design options faster. So, as you'll see, so when get back to that how to draw faces sort of thing. So you'll notice that the sides of She-Hulk's mouth are lining up with the center of her eyes. That's a little trick people use when trying to get the proportions of a character down. Right. So you can see. And then her face has a natural curve to it. In particular, She-Hulk, like I said before, her cheekbones are one of her signature character elements. So pay attention to those things, those little tidbits of iconography. I don't know, I just made that up. When you're drawing a character. really like She-Hulk. I don't know if anybody's kind of halfway paying attention to the Q&A part of this. Apologies for that. But She-Hulk is one of my favorite Marvel characters, and I haven't been able to draw her much. I like her because she is one of those characters that is powerful unto herself. There's a lot of tropes in storytelling that even the female heroes will sometimes find themselves to be the damsels in distress. And I've always liked She-Hulk because she's never waited around for someone to save her necessarily. Even in her private life, she's a lawyer. She's somebody who's gone out to make change and to make the world a better place, even without her powers. I always thought that was a great element to her character. Do you have a story from a fan encounter or con that stuck with you? Yeah, I do have a bunch of stories of fans and from various shows. Let's see. One of my favorites, a couple of my favorites are those moments where you really feel like you've connected with people. One of the hardest things about drawing comics for a living is that you find that there are very few outlets outside of your drawing table after you start drawing for a living. Between deadlines, between just making sure that your life is functional, it's very hard to find the time to be social and to meet with friends. And man, I don't mean to go off on sob stories about that, but it is very, very daunting when you're drawing comics for a living to not have that connection with people sometimes. And so when I go to conventions, and boy, do I miss them. Conventions allow me to connect with fans and to connect with other creators in a way that you just don't have the opportunity to. So let's see, a couple stories from when I was at a convention that people. Oh, okay. So sorry, I'm trying to think and draw at the same time. Those aren't necessarily mutually beneficial for me. So one of my favorite moments at a convention is when I get a little kid come up to me and they reach into their back pocket, or they pull go into their backpack, and they pull out a tattered, just beaten up version of a comic book that I've drawn and ask me to sign it. And man, I love that, because that kid has just loved that book. I growing up, I had my bed, and I had the island of comics that surrounded my bed. And so when that kid comes up to me, that's when I see a true young fan. Somebody that's into it for the stories, for the characters, for the adventures. And it just warms my heart. Another time, there was a convention where a very, very wonderful couple got engaged, and my wife and I helped with the engagement process, the proposal. That was just awesome. let's see. So, okay, back to technical stuff on this drawing real quick. As you can see, I'm going around and doing like that silhouette. It all comes back to that same idea of silhouette. You want, when you're drawing and you're creating an image, you want that silhouette to speak out and to say, this is exactly what this is. And so one of the things I'm doing right now is I'm going around and I'm doing the silhouette first with a very thick pen, thicker than I normally work with, to really make the character in the image stand out more. So, little tip for y'all. What specific pens do you prefer to use for inking? It depends on the line that I am making. So right now I'm working with a multi-liner. This is, I don't know if I'm allowed to mention brand names, but you can see it. I also use these guys. And I also use these ones. This is my brush pen that I use a lot. There's another brush pen that I use that I'm not going to be using today. I also have been known to use quills. Anything that makes the mark that you want. That's the pen that you use, and that doesn't have to be like some $high drawing tool. You could. Most of my high school years, all I drew with were, oh man, I can't even remember the name of them now. But they were like fine point pens, not ballpoint pens, but and this was probably before gel pens came out. But I used a whole lot of ballpoint pens too. You can get some really cool shading with them. So, again, just going over the silhouette here to reinforce that overall structure of the character. That's one of the things also, you know, again, with talking about silhouette and the image that you're creating, oftentimes the pose that you're using, the shape that the character makes on the overall in the end all image also speaks to who that character is. You know, I'm not going to draw, you know, She-Hulk just kind of slumping off to the side. I'm going to draw her strong and powerful and ready to punch through a brick wall. The question, when you are working on a comic, what kind of paper do you draw on? And then it says something else I can read. I usually use Bristol board. And there are tons of different kinds of Bristol board. I prefer a kind of a plate surface. They come in plate and smooth and a few others, semi-smooth, stuff like that. I find that plate or semi-smooth are good for allowing me to be able to pencil and ink on something. I just got a notice from my earbuds that my earbuds are about to die, which means I might have to go into speaker for a minute. I was afraid of this. Technical difficulties. Another important thing when you're drawing a character is have reference nearby. I printed out some versions of She-Hulk here to be able to make sure I know what her outfit looks like and stuff like that. Okay, just 1 second. I'm going to switch out my earbuds. Check, check. Just want to make sure everybody can hear me. Sound might not be as good. Getting a notice whether sound is great. Okay, cool. Sorry about that. My earbuds are charging right now, so if we need to switch back for better sound quality, we can. Okay, so let's see. As you can see here, when I don't know if you guys can see this or not, but in the drawing here we have the other sketch, and you can see I've kind of made points and markings that kind of show me where the muscles are. You don't have to fill those in. That's like the detail stuff that kind of helps you decide what you're going to draw, how your style is going to look. I tend to try, like, it depends on the character, but with She-Hulk in particular, I feel like she's got these great shapes, these great this great muscular shape to her that you don't have to over accentuate her muscles to tell that she's this very powerful character. Question: how do you know? How do I know where to place shadows in my drawing? So that comes down to lighting. Can't really get too much into lighting because I'm not really going for a lighting moment here. There's not a high contrast to really tell you where lighting would be effective or not. But you can tell from the way that I drew her hair. So you can see that, like, she's got this area around her hair that forms that silhouette, but also it also kind of highlights the white area. It kind of highlights and would tell a colorist she's a little bit backlit, like there's a light source behind her, especially with how her hair is darker here. It's all about lighting with shadows. Generally with comics, unless there's a specific light source that you're going for, it's well, I don't want to say, like, don't pay attention to lighting, because you do have to pay attention to lighting. It's very, very important. But it's tough to really tell where the lighting should be every time. But in this particular piece, I'm just going kind of with a general lighting source, and there's not a whole lot to indicate where the light will be coming from. So this piece I'm keeping black and white. The next one's going to be colored, so we can talk about color a little bit. I'm not a great colorist, but I feel like She-Hulk deserves a little bit of shade, a little tonality. So okay, I'm kind of getting into shade right now. So the elements of her costume that are dark purple, I'm going in and I'm going to add a little shade, and in that I'm going to stick with that theme of her being backlit. So when I do that, things that are closer to the center, like it's going to be like an extra line just on the inside of her forms that will um, accentuate the lighting and the placement of the mood for that. I don't know. I'm kind of babbling here. So hands are a thing. People find tough to draw, and kind of only comes with practice. So the hand, you want to remember that it's basically a triangle. Like, so here's the wrist, and then there's like a triangle shape that happens, and all the knuckles go back to that wrist in a triangle form, and then the fingers go out also in a similar pattern there. The best way to get to know how to draw hands is another way to get to know how to draw hands is studying how to draw wings, because the structure of a wing and the structure of a hand is pretty similar when you're drawing them. You have how the structure of a light plays off of the body. Use these moments of like this little highlight here not only shows like the shape of her body, but also kind of implies that she's got some muscle underneath her skin. It's all ways to reinforce the final image. And again, with this, I've moved back to the brush pen because it allows me to use a variety of line shapes and to kind of get more of an organic feel to the lines that I'm making. Plus, brush pens are good for being able to fill in a dark area fast. Was there a comic book moment that really resonated with you or meant a lot to you as a kid? Comic book moment that resonated with me as a kid. Yeah, there's about 10,000 of them in my boxes. Let's see. Man. I think the things that resonated with me when I was growing up the most, and I think this is kind of generally true for a lot of comic book creators, um, aren't just the hero moments of got the bad guy, but the moments that helped me become me as a person. You know, seeing Peter Parker struggle as Spider-Man and as a reporter. When characters faced questions in their superhero life that were similar to the questions that I faced growing up. I hate like comics. Comics are just such a great tool for feeling like you have a place in the world in my mind, or at least they were for me. When, like I said, when I was growing up, I moved around a lot, and they allowed me to connect with comics allowed me to connect with the characters in a way that also helped me connect with all the new people I was meeting, every couple of years when we moved. Also, if it weren't for comics, there's a really great quote. Comics are the gateway drug to literacy. I pretty much learned to read because I was always shuffling through comics. Good question coming up. What superpower would you like to have? Oh boy. These days, I'd like to have multiple arms so I could draw more or faster. Flying has always been a big one. Okay, so voila. I'm gonna call it a wrap for the She-Hulk bust. If you're paying attention, if you're on social media, I will be auctioning these off for a good cause. I'll get more into that on my social media stuff. You can find me there. Right now, I'm going over it with a gum eraser to get rid of more of the pencil lines. Gum erasers are good for this because they don't damage the drawing or image at all, as long as you're dealing with it. As long as all of your ink is dry. Almost done. One more little spot. Hold on. Okay, bada boom. Now about to move on to the larger full body picture. Question, are you on any upcoming books we should know about? I am, say goodbye to the Boast. I just wrapped up drawing 2 issues of Thor. And that's issues 7 and 8, which we get to have a new person pick up the Thor hammer. It's very exciting stuff. And then after that, it's all a big secret, so I can't tell you yet. Okay, so we're going to color this as we go, and use these markers here. Kind of do a test mark off to the side to kind of tell myself what tones we're going to be using. Help me figure out how much light and darkness I can play around with here. All different shades of green right there. Okay. So I'm just going right over the pencils to start. This will allow me to go in with the inks later and really just make the image pop, but also coloring it like this allows you to it kind of it lets you focus on the tones and the shapes, and when it comes to inking it, you don't necessarily have to go so heavy-handed with the inking. You can leave things to be much looser, much more open and organic. I'm saying organic a lot during this session. Again, if anybody's still there, feel free to keep writing in the questions. Gives me something to talk about, or just put a soundtrack on and put me on mute. No feelings hurt here. But I do enjoy talking about art. So as I'm going over this, you'll notice that I'm kind of leaving a little gap in some spots between the color and the line work. And that's going to be important later on so that I can do more highlighting and really reinforce the colors, reinforce the lighting and the shape, and it really helps with reinforcing the silhouette again. What is the hardest common object to draw? I feel like this is probably a question from a vindictful writer. Um, okay. Probably rotary phones, which, I'm very grateful we don't have to draw very many of them anymore. Got lots of curves, lots of different shapes. Make it uh, things like that where they are common, they're everyday use. At least they used to be. Are really difficult to draw because we all know what things look like. We all have our mental images of what a phone looks like, what a coffee pot looks like, and uh, drawing them, getting them wrong. If you get it wrong, everybody can see it. I mean, it's one of those things that's just kind of stands out. So common everyday objects are one of the toughest things to get right every time. So right now I'm just going over and creating basically a base layer of her skin tone. And I'm going to go over this more with various other shades of green in order to really enrich your skin. Uh, remember when I was in junior high, I had a assignment to draw a portrait of a person, and I remember it blew my mind when my teacher was like, everybody has so many different shades. Everything has so many different shades in there in color, and to use just one would feel static. So now I'm just going over areas that I feel are going to be a little bit darker. Again, using negative space to kind of help make her features stand out more. How do you decide what's the right pose? That involves a lot of sketching. And it's really like an internal question. There's no right or wrong pose. Well, there are wrong poses, I guess. But there are various degrees of right pose. In this one in particular, I had come up with various other sketches of how to pose her for this piece. And I ultimately decided on this because I felt like it really emphasized the power that her character demands. Like, she's not just a strong character, but she's graceful. She's not just graceful, but also intelligent. These are things to think about when you're coming up with a pose, when you're coming up with the stature of a character. One thing that I like is when a character design and their personality are just perfectly in sync. One of the reasons I really like She-Hulk is because of that power that she holds. But and as I mentioned earlier, how she not only uses it as a superpower, but she's also powerful in her own right, in her own mind, as a lawyer, as somebody who's seeking to make things right in the world. Um, but also, I like her because she's kind of a contrast to her cousin, the Hulk. You know, when she was created, the Hulk was still kind of a mindless brute, and um, and she came along and kind of opened the gateway for the Hulk to evolve into more of uh, an intelligent character versus just a reactionary one. Of course, I also like just the brute force nature of the Hulk too. So it's always fun. So as you can see here, I'm also going back over and with again more tones of green to help kind of get rid of the marker lines that might be standing out. It allows the ink to bleed together a little bit more, form a more that's a horrible sound. More of like a watercolor sort of palette. Like it's hard to describe. Also, the way you work with color, at least with marker, the lines that you make. Like here, I'm going in small circles to help the ink blend together instead of just back and forth. Um, okay, so we got the base down for her skin tone. Now we're going to go in and do the base for her costume. To find a nice purple. Maybe just start it with a lighter tone. Too light. How is the best way to sketch? Well, that's different for everybody. Best way to sketch is, for me, sketching starts with learning how an object looks. And the best way to learn how an object looks is to draw it from life. So it's very important to learn how the body works, learn your anatomy, learn how the body moves, what kind of shapes the body forms into when moving around. Because there's one thing about the thing about drawing things that everybody knows, and this goes back to that object question of how to draw. or what's my most hated common object? um, we like I said before, we know what certain things look like, certain commonalities and certain like everyday objects that we see all the time, and when you mess those up, like I said, it really stands out. But um, a way to get around that is to practice drawing common everyday objects. But that also leads to um, lends itself to sketching. When you're sketching a character and when you're sketching out a new idea, it's better to have like a treasure trove in your mind of how things look and how things work without having to necessarily look them up all the time. I know I studied anatomy growing up. My mom uh, wanted me to become a medical illustrator. Uh, so from the time I was, I don't know, under 10, let's just say that, a lot of the art books I would get were anatomy books. Um, and that led me to learning more about how the body works, how we stand, how we move, how we breathe and react to things, and it really it lent itself to drawing comic books way more than probably my mom really appreciated at the time. um, but as far as that goes, most digital or most medical art is digital now, so art books would have helped, but I would have needed a computer growing up to really get into that. So here I'm just going in with different tones, different shades again to kind of reinforce the lighting, the overall body structure. Another question. So, other than comics, graphic novels, do you have other types of art that you like to do? I do. Um, I used to do a lot of watercolor painting. Um, I would love to get back to that sometime. I used to design posters for bands and music shows and stuff like that. Uh, there's really not an area of art that I haven't tried, and I could usually find an appreciation for any form of art, because it's not so much about what I use to draw, but rather what the idea is I'm trying to put forth. I kind of hesitate, like when I draw comics, I consider it more of drafting and illustration than necessarily like fine art. And before the internet yells at me, so my theory behind this is that, so a comic book and comic strip, they're definitely art, but I think of them as a collective idea being created. So each comic book is trying to tell a story about the characters. Each panel is trying to convey a piece of that story. Um, whereas with what I would consider fine art, and when I say fine, I don't mean better. I don't mean like one thing is better than the other. Um, but gallery art, um, those paintings, sculptures, whatever, visual experiences, um, sensory experiences, uh, they are about um, creating a multitude of ideas, usually. And, there's examples to contrast that, but it's an experience with one image or one experience, like one, whether it's a painting or a sculpture or something like that. It tells all of the story with one movement, whereas comics are multiple people working very hard together to create multiple experiences. So I think of art and comic books in different places in my mind. The question: any advice for aspiring artists to get their art seen? Boy, we live in a good time for that. The internet is your friend. Um, so I did not go to art school. I did not do much of college. Um, but I've always drawn, and I've always put myself out there. I've always put my work in front of people to see and to interact with. And when I got started, before I was drawing comics professionally, I took part in a lot of internet drawing like challenges, or like we did. There's a group of fellow comic creators that um, got together before any of us were professional, as fans, and we would compete with each other. It was a group called 10 Ton Studios. I don't know if I'm supposed to say that or not. But we would get together online, and every week we would have these challenges, these draw offs, and in that we had certain rules. It had to be traditional, like an actual drawing on paper, and it also we would compete with each other. So we'd have a vote at the end of the week. Somebody would pick a character, then vote at the end of the week to see whose was the best drawing. And whoever won that, they were able to pick somebody else's art, and that person would have to send them their piece. So it was like all hands on deck. It was a good challenge, a good motivator to only put your best stuff forward, but also kind of the zen of it, of being able to let go of it too. So I did stuff like that online for years, and that eventually led to a great group of friends that I don't get to talk to nearly as much as I would like. That all pushed each other to be better artists. We had these competitions, but we would do these competitions, and then we would critique each other. We would say, okay, I like this about it, but you could work on this. And that was basically my school. That's how I learned to be better. It's how I learned to meet tight deadlines, because every week you had to have a finished piece. And so a lot of those folks got jobs in the industry while I was just a working schmo. And it was through knowing them and them liking what I do that they eventually hired me to draw comics. That's how I eventually got my first job with Marvel. I worked on a couple books before that, and then one of those friends introduced me to another person and introduced me to an editor. So word of mouth is key. So I'm gonna kind of focus on the drawing for a second here. Hair is one of those things that requires a little bit more focus for me. She-Hulk's hair, she has very bouncy hair. I like that. Here again, I'm mostly just trying to add to the contrast so that I can imply light, can imply shapes inside the overall shape. Carefully, eyebrows, carefully, eyelashes, carefully drawing lips. It helps that she's all green. Otherwise, all of those very carefully would have been different shades of different colors. Oh, heartbreaking question. Did I ever get to meet Stan Lee? I did not get to meet him, unfortunately. Although I do have a funny story about him. So when I was a kid, I went to my first comic convention in Philadelphia, and my parents dropped me off. I was probably like 14, 15. I got dropped off at the door, and as I'm walking through the entryway of the convention center, ticket badge in hand and ready to experience my first big comic book convention. As I'm going through the atrium, off to my left, across the way, Stan Lee was just coming out of a panel, and he had his entourage of comic book folks just surrounding him. And I'm chuckling to myself, being like, "Oh man, there's Stan Lee right there." And Stan and his entourage and I all reach the main doors to the convention center at the same time. And I kind of proudly, 15-year-old self, show the security worker my badge and walk on through, and Stan is abruptly stopped by security and asked to see his badge. And he had that look on his face of like, I'm Stan Lee. What are you kidding me? It was pretty funny. Man, what a guy. I very rarely heard anything negative about him, and I don't think I've ever heard anything negative about him. I loved his ability to accept other people's stories. Like I was able to go to the Stan Lee celebration in New York after his passing, and just story after story of him hearing other people's ideas of these characters that he made, he created, and gave so much life to. And, a creator being like, well, I want to do X, Y, and Z with that character. And the way that he would just be like, that sounds great, and so encouraging. And, oh man, I wouldn't have thought of that, I love that in creators, and the ability to have their character have these stories and stuff that we all love, but also the ability to like just let go and let other people run with them, and I think it's one of the best, one of my favorite elements of Stan Lee stories, is his overall enthusiasm for just telling stories. Question: how much do comic book artists work with the colorists who color their pieces? Um, yeah, that depends on the team up. I've worked with colorists where we're shooting back and forth questions and answers from the moment we get the script. And generally, I find that works best. The more communication, the better. There's probably not a book that I've drawn where I shouldn't have communicated more with the colorist. It's tough, you work 16 to 18-hour days, and by the time it comes to sending in your artwork, it's sometimes it's just exhausting to sit there and write out all of your thoughts and theories about what something should look like. So to answer the question, not as much as I should, but I feel like most people in the industry understand that's the issue, and they don't hold any grudges for it. Okay, big question. Can you give any advice for my daughter who loves to do illustration but has autism and can't find an internship or job? Well, there are people, man, advice. Do what you love. It is never easy to get work as an artist. Generally, I found that word of mouth is the best way. And I think this would be true for anybody, regardless of social hindrances. Putting yourself out there and showing your work and being vocal about what you do, there will be somebody out there that hears you. And there will be somebody out there eventually that says, hey, I like this. I want to pay you for this. I want to pay you to do this. And there are a lot of people out there that have a unique voice, and I think we live in a really good time with the age of information and the internet, etc., to be able to express ourselves and be heard. So more power to your daughter. So you can see here, I've done the tones. Now I'm going in with the line work, and it's just helping to accentuate the form that's already there. And because I've already colored it, I can see where later on, in a couple minutes, I can add details, and where I don't have to add details because the color already says, the toning of the colors already say what I want to say with it. So this is typically something that I would do at a convention. Sorry, I'm getting lost in the focus. Are there any current comic book artists that inspire me? Man, it's a loaded question if I forget somebody. I don't want to hurt anybody's feelings. Yeah, lots. All my fellow young guns are all just absolutely amazing people. I'm so glad that I've been able to be a part of that program, because not just for the for the attention that comes with it. But it is particularly awesome because I've been able to be connected to artists and creators that I wouldn't necessarily have gotten to meet. And it's really difficult for artists to meet each other in this medium, because we work with lots of colorists and lots of writers, lots of editors, but rarely do we as artists, pencilers, inkers, get to connect. So the Tintin program really, or I'm sorry, the Young Gun program really did a great job of connecting me to some people that inspire me, but also allows me to befriend them. And that's a great feeling. And just working on reinforcing that silhouette. Here's a question. How do you shut it off when you work in the place that you live? You really don't. And that's not just a fact of like living and working in the same place. That's just a matter of doing what you love. I'm fortunate enough to have a studio kind of separated from the rest of my house right now, but I've also been in a situation where my bed and my drawing desk were less than 10 feet apart. So I would roll out of bed and literally just roll into the drawing chair. But I found that it doesn't matter. Like, when you're doing what you love, when you're making something that speaks to what you want to put in the world, you never really turn it off. It can be daunting, but the trick to being happy is to find that balance between um, your work and your play. Let's say play. Finding that balance between the stuff that really lets you unwind, holding on to those things and recognizing when you need to step away is really, really, really important. And that can change. When I first started drawing for a living, I didn't really realize how important that was, and I would push myself into a slump, as it were. But over time, you learn to take walks, you learn to reach out to friends, go out to movies. Well, maybe not anymore. but it's important to know your limits and to know what helps you unwind. I personally, like I said, I go for walks and stuff, but when I'm really taking a break, I'll go jump in a kayak or something, take a river float, or I've grown to enjoy baking, or learning how to bake, actually, I should say, because it's not always successful. Pie crusts are my thing. Bread's not so much. All right, got 15 minutes left here, folks. So if you have any more questions, feel free to just chime on in. Or if there was a question that you asked earlier and I didn't pay attention to it, feel free to ask again. What has been your favorite title to work on so far? Well, each project has its own thing. You know, I generally only take projects that I know I'm going to enjoy. Otherwise, you as a creator, you spend so much time drawing and sitting with these characters and these stories day in, day out. Easily, the artist, the penciler, inker, spends more time on these books than most likely spends more time on these books than any other person in the creative process. And so you have to take projects that you know that you're gonna sink into and be okay with. So advice to up and coming artists is always feel free to say no. If someone is offering you a job, or if somebody is approaching you with something that they want to pay you to do, and if it doesn't feel right, I can guarantee that somebody else is out there and is willing to pay you to do what you want. Because ultimately, it will look better, it will feel better, and you will be happier with the product. Okay, about 10 minutes left. just going in and adding some details. Bricks are great. Bricks are great to draw. They had so much the concept of rubble and roughage and destruction. So one more question, I think. Do I have any advice for artist block? My advice for artist block is, so when I find myself just unable to draw, or at least to draw what I'm supposed to be drawing, what I do is I sit down and I play around with artistic mediums that I'm not normally, I'm not very experienced with. So in the past, it's been like, I'll break out watercolors, I'll play around with some clay, or something that helps me create, but I also have to think about in the sense of it's new to me, so I can lose myself in the process versus trying to make that thing perfect, or make that thing that I'm not particularly inspired to make at the time. I find diving into other mediums to be key for breaking out of that cycle. Okay. I don't know if you all can hear, but my dog is barking in the background. Lots of movement in the house happening. This is what you get for working from home. We're getting really close to the finish line here, folks. I could take another couple questions. the final stuff here. Working on just putting She-Hulk's name in here. I don't know why I chose this color. It helps her stand out a bit. Question, do you have any dogs? And if so, what are their names? I have 3 great dogs. I have a German Shepherd, I have a Standard Poodle, and a Pit Rescue. German Shepherd is named Jonesy, and he might be the nicest, sweetest, smartest dog I've ever met. The Poodle is named Oscar, after Oscar the Grouch, but he's not very much like his namesake because he is the silliest dog. He very well could have just been a reincarnated Muppet. And my Pit Rescue Chester, he is just a sweetheart also. I love them all. I also have 2 cats. One is named Blue and the other is named Marco. And I really feel like they should all be paying rent, but you know, can't seem to figure that one out. Chester, my Pit Rescue, is named after a bar I used to work in. It no longer exists anymore, so but it was a dance hall that I met my wife in. So yes, these are the wonderful dogs that we saw in the episode of my Marvel Quick Draw. And my marker here is dying on me. So I'm going to have to switch to another shade. And hopefully we can find something that's close enough to the last one. Oh, it's a lot darker. I don't know how I feel about that. Once again, I'm going to be auctioning these off for a charity. If you want to find me on social media, please do if you're interested. Going to help people that are lacking proper protection for the corona stuff going around. I bet the director is wishing I hadn't done the lettering. Do you prefer drawing aspect or coloring of picture? Oh, do I prefer the drawing aspect or the coloring of the picture? I like both. You know, there is not much that I don't like about creating, whether it's drawing the character, or coloring the character, or what. As long as it's mine, I enjoy the process. So I will finish up this lettering off camera, I think, so we can get a couple more moments. I'm just going to assume that we're going to keep going for just a few more minutes. Man, I'm really not feeling this. This is way pinker than I wanted it to be. Pink's not bad, right? It's definitely hoping for more of a salmon to like kind of lay in the background. But my marker died. So what I'm doing here is I'm going back over the area that I already previously colored with the dyeing marker in order to blend it in with the tones of the other ones, the replacement tone. That way it kind of hides the fact that I had a dyeing marker. Okay. One tiny last thing. So I like to go in with a contrasting tone. Here I'm using a lavender to really highlight the shades, since I'm going over time anyway. So the green and the lavender kind of contrast to create a nice subtle contrast, shade, tone, whatever you want to call it. Oh boy. You all should feel very lucky I didn't start doing silly voices during this. All right. Like I said, check me out on social media, and we'll work on getting these auctioned off to get some people some masks and stuff, some PPEs. Thank you, folks.